All right, let's kick things off and dive right into this 2024 election, trying to unpack what it all might mean for the economy. And especially for all of you crypto folks out there, we've got some really interesting sources here laying out like the contrasting visions of Trump and Kamala Harris. Let me tell you, their approaches, they could lead to some pretty wild scenarios for your investments.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how these two figures, they almost represent like completely opposite economic philosophies. You've got Trump coming from that business background, always pushing for, a smaller government role in the economy. And then you've got Harris, who seems to be more in favor of like a hands-on approach, which could have some pretty big implications for how we all invest.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here. One of the most talked about proposals from Harris is this whole idea of taxing unrealized capital gains. Just to be clear for anyone who's not familiar with that term, it basically means you could be taxed on profits you haven't even cashed in on yet. So what do you think about the potential impact of that, especially in the crazy world of crypto?
Oh man, this policy, it could be a real game changer for investors. Think about it. You're holding some Bitcoin and it suddenly shoots up in value, but you haven't sold yet. So it's all just, on paper. Under this proposal, you could still owe taxes on that profit, even though it's unrealized. And then imagine the market takes a dip before you sell. You could end up paying taxes on gains you never even actually saw, which would shrink your potential profits even more.
So basically, you could get hit with this double whammy of taxes, first on those paper gains and then again when you actually sell. I bet that would make a lot of people think twice before investing.
Oh, absolutely. And it's particularly important for crypto because it's already known for like these wild price swings. This policy could just add another layer of complexity and risk for investors in a market that's already, super unpredictable.
Totally, totally. And it's not just about unrealized gains, right? What about the team Harris might put together? The sources we're looking at, they suggest Gary Gensler could be a key player. He's known for his pretty strict approach to crypto regulation as SEC chair. So what kind of impact do you think that could have on the crypto landscape?
Well, Gensler, he definitely has a history of pushing for tighter regulations on crypto. I mean, under his watch at the SEC, we've seen a much more assertive stance. So if he were to take on a broader economic role in a Harris administration, it's quite possible we'd see that regulatory trend continue or maybe even intensify.
So for all the crypto fans out there, a Harris presidency could mean having to deal with a tighter regulatory landscape, which could affect everything from trading to innovation. That definitely adds a whole layer of uncertainty to the future of crypto.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it really underscores how important it is to understand the specifics of each candidate's approach to regulation and its impact on different parts of the economy, including, of course, the world of digital assets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's switch gears for a minute. Let's look at the other side of the coin. What jumps out at you about Trump's economic vision and how it might be different from Harris's approach, especially when it comes to crypto?
Well, Trump's stance, it seems to be really rooted in his background in business. He's always talking about cutting government spending, reducing all that bureaucratic red tape, and creating a more business-friendly environment. His whole approach seems to be about stepping back and letting the market kind of drive growth.
Interesting. And our sources, they even hint at a pretty intriguing possibility. Elon Musk advising Trump on how to streamline government operations.
Now, that would be fascinating to see. Musk has this reputation for shaking things up and finding ways to be more efficient. We've seen it with how he restructured Twitter, which is, of course, now known as X. So, I mean, applying that kind of thinking to government, it could lead to some really interesting outcomes, both positive and negative, of course.
Right, right. So we're potentially looking at a leaner government with less spending and maybe a more hands-off approach to regulation. I bet that sounds pretty good to a lot of crypto advocates.
Yeah, it's definitely a scenario that many in the crypto space would find appealing. Less government involvement often means more freedom and flexibility for emerging industries like crypto to innovate and grow. But, we also have to remember that deregulation can come with its own set of risks and challenges.
Yeah, for sure. It's always about finding that right balance. So let's focus in on the crypto side of things a bit more. How did the crypto market actually perform under Trump's previous presidency compared to the regulatory climate we're seeing now?
Well, it's important to remember that the crypto landscape, it was totally different during Trump's first term. I mean, it was a much younger industry. And there wasn't really an established regulatory framework. So while there were definitely discussions about regulation back then, the overall approach was, I'd say, more lenient compared to the stricter stance we've seen lately.
Right, right. And it's interesting that both Trump and Musk, They've publicly expressed their interest in crypto, recognizing its potential to, like, disrupt the world of finance.
Yeah, that shared enthusiasm for crypto is definitely worth noting. It suggests that a Trump administration might be more open to creating a more favorable environment for digital assets to thrive. But of course, we always have to consider the potential downsides and unintended consequences of any policy, even ones that seem to align with our own interests.
Absolutely. You always have to look at the whole picture. So, on the crypto front, a Trump win could potentially mean a shift towards a less restrictive environment, potentially leading to more innovation and growth within the industry. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things actually play out.
Exactly. There are always complexities and unforeseen challenges. When you try to turn campaign promises into real policy, it's so important to look beyond the headlines and really dig into the potential implications of each candidate's approach.
Okay, so we've got these two very different visions on the table. On one hand, a potentially stricter regulatory environment under Harris, and on the other, the possibility of a more hands-off approach under Trump. It's fascinating to think about how these different paths could shape the future of the economy, especially for those of you who are involved in crypto.
Yeah, and it really highlights the importance of staying informed and making thoughtful decisions as we head into this election.
Couldn't agree more. Now, let's take a closer look at some specific policies and how they might impact the crypto market. I'm particularly interested in how each candidate's broader economic vision might trickle down to the world of digital assets.
All right, sounds good. Let's dig in. You know, one area where their philosophies really clash is on government spending and how it affects economic growth. Harris seems to be more in favor of,
Right.
a bigger role for the government when it comes to stimulating the economy, maybe through more spending on social programs and infrastructure.
Yeah. That could have both good and bad effects, right? Depending on how it's done. What are some of the potential upsides and downsides of that approach?
Well, on the plus side, more government spending can create jobs, boost demand, stimulate economic activity, especially when things are slow or in a recession. It's kind of like priming the pump,
Yeah.
to get the economic engine running smoothly. But the thing is, too much spending can also lead to inflation, higher taxes, and a bigger national debt, which would be a burden for future generations.
Yeah.
It's a tough balancing act.
Right. How would that be different from Trump's vision for economic growth?
Well, Trump tends to be all about a smaller role for government in the economy. He often talks about cutting taxes and getting rid of regulations as ways to encourage growth. His philosophy seems to be more about, letting businesses do their thing with less government interference.
So it's like that classic debate, right? Government intervention versus free market principles. How do you think those different philosophies would play out in the crypto world specifically?
That's where things get really interesting under a Harris administration with its focus on government-led economic initiatives. We might see a more cautious approach to crypto regulation. The focus could be on, minimizing risks and protecting consumers, which might lead to stricter rules and more oversight.
So for people who are invested in crypto, that could mean they'd have to deal with a more complex regulatory landscape, maybe with higher compliance costs and slower innovation. It's a question of weighing those potential downsides against the benefits of a more stable and regulated market.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, under a Trump administration, with its emphasis on deregulation and, a more hands-off approach, we might see a more laissez-faire attitude towards crypto. That could create a space where innovation really takes off and the industry grows more quickly. But it could also increase the risk of things like scams and fraud and maybe even more market volatility.
So it's a trade-off. More regulation could bring stability but potentially hold back growth, while less regulation could boost innovation but also make things riskier. Tough call for policymakers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's a decision that could have huge implications for the future of crypto and the whole economy.
All right, let's zoom out a little. Let's talk about their foreign policy stances. How do you think their different approaches to global affairs could affect the economic landscape, especially for crypto?
Yeah, that's another crucial thing to consider. Harris seems to be more aligned with, a multilateral approach to foreign policy, emphasizing diplomacy, alliances, and international cooperation. Trump, on the other hand, he often takes a more unilateral America First approach, prioritizing national interests and negotiating directly with other countries.
Yeah, those are some pretty big differences. How do you think those approaches might play out when it comes to international trade and finance, especially for something like crypto, which is borderless by nature?
Well, a more multilateral approach, like we might see under Harris, could lead to more international coordination on crypto regulation, That could create a more harmonized global framework, potentially fostering stability and cross-border collaboration. But it could also slow things down if different countries have trouble agreeing on common rules.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. More global coordination could bring clarity and stability, but it could also mean more bureaucracy and slower progress.
Exactly, exactly. And then if we look at a more unilateral approach, like we might see under Trump, it could lead to a more fragmented regulatory landscape for crypto, where different countries adopt their own sets of rules, creating a patchwork of regulations that could be tricky for businesses to navigate. But it could also allow for more experimentation and competition between different regulatory models, which might actually lead to some really innovative solutions.
So it seems like there's no easy answer here. Each approach to foreign policy has its own pluses and minuses for crypto. It's all about weighing the trade-offs and thinking about the long-term effects.
Precisely. And I think it highlights the importance of looking beyond just domestic policy. We have to understand how global events and geopolitical trends can shape the future of crypto and the entire financial landscape.
All right, let's bring it back down to earth for a second. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to figure out how this election might affect their crypto investments?
Well, I'd say the most important thing is to stay informed, diversify your portfolio, and try not to make impulsive decisions based on, short-term market swings. It's crucial to understand the potential implications of each candidate's policies. But it's also important to remember that markets are complex and unpredictable. There's no magic crystal ball that can tell us exactly what's going to happen.
Right. So it's all about taking that long-term perspective, doing your homework, and making informed decisions that align with your own risk tolerance and investment goals.
Exactly, exactly. And also recognizing that, political events can definitely influence markets, but they're just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so as we wrap up our analysis, it's time to step back and look at the big picture. We've explored the different economic visions of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, dug into their potential approaches to crypto regulation, and considered the wider implications of their foreign policy stances. So what are your final thoughts as we head into this big election?
Well, it's pretty clear that this election, it's kind of a make or break moment for the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
And, especially for how we approach these new technologies like crypto. We've looked at two very different paths, each with its own potential upsides and downsides. I think the choice voters have to make, it really comes down to what kind of future they want for the country.
Yeah.
And how they think these technologies should fit into that future.
It's interesting how politics often mirrors those bigger societal debates we're having about innovation, regulation, the role of government, and crypto with its potential to shake things up and all the unique challenges that come with it. It's right at the center of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, crypto challenges how we think about finance, governance, even national borders. It forces us to rethink the systems we have in place and grapple with these new possibilities. And how we as a society choose to deal with those challenges, it's going to have huge implications down the road.
So for our listeners who are trying to process all of this and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, what are some key things they should take away from all of this?
Okay, first things first, don't panic. It's easy to get caught up in all the hype and the fear-mongering around elections and, how the markets are swinging. Just take a deep breath. Do your research and make informed decisions. Decisions that align with your own financial goals and your risk tolerance.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to get pulled in by all the emotions, the ups and downs of the news cycle. Taking a step back, looking at the facts, and really understanding your own investment strategy, it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the second thing to remember is this. This election is important, sure, but it's just one event in the long journey of the crypto market. This industry is still very young, and it's going to keep evolving no matter who wins the presidency.
That's a helpful way to think about it. It's easy to get fixated on the short-term noise, but stepping back and remembering the big picture can help us stay focused on the long-term potential of this technology.
Exactly. And finally, don't underestimate the power of staying engaged and informed. The crypto world is constantly changing. Policies are still being developed, So stay curious, keep learning, and be part of the conversation. Your voice and your choices really do matter.
Great advice. And just to reiterate, our goal here isn't to tell you what to think or how to vote. It's about giving you the knowledge and the tools to make your own informed decisions.
Exactly. We've tried to give you a balanced perspective here, highlighting the potential benefits and risks of each candidate's approach. Now it's up to you to weigh those factors. Think about your own values and priorities, and choose the path that you think is best for your own financial future and for the future of this exciting technology.
Well said. Well said. And with that, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the 2024 election and its potential impact on the crypto world. It's been a fascinating journey, exploring these contrasting visions, the possible risks and rewards, and the bigger implications of this pivotal moment. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit entertaining.
Yeah, it's been great sharing these insights with you all. And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, stay curious, and keep asking those questions. The future of finance and technology is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in making it happen.